You're listening to the Photofocus podcast. This is the October 5th edition. And joining me this week is a special guest, Jan Kabili. Jan, can you tell folks a little bit about your background and with photography and what sort of areas you enjoy and work in?
Hi, Rich. Thanks so much for having me on your show. It's really an honor. My background in photography started when I was already midway through another career. I used to be a lawyer. And after many years of that, I started to see what was going on in the visual world, and I was really excited by it. And so I went to grad school, and I got an MFA degree in photography, and that made all the difference. That kind of set me off on a new path. I spent a summer in Aspen at a place called Anderson Ranch Art Center, interacting with some of the most amazing photographers out there who come up there to teach workshops. People like Jerry Olsman and Maggie Taylor and Linda Weinman. And I met Linda there, and that was the start of a brand new career, learning how to teach, and then becoming, a real devoted instructor of post-processing for photographers. I teach everything from Photoshop to Elements to Lightroom to iPhoto. Anything they got, I'll teach it. And I really think it's an important thing because I think it's a language that people need to know these days.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, which is that, you were working in one career, and like many of our listeners, there are a lot of people who are making that decision of, well, should I pursue photography or what is that opportunity? I think without getting into the gist of it, most people would say, a career as a lawyer, if you were making it there, you probably, that's a lot of work. That's a master's degree and exams and everything else. And you were working in a lot of very interesting areas, and you decided, you know what, I'm more intrigued by photography. How does one get the courage to just say, okay, I'm going to take what most people think is a hobby and suddenly make it and the education around it a job?
Well, I don't have a good answer for you because it just kind of happened for me. And if I did anything to make that happen, it was that I let go. I stopped saying you have to stay on track. I started opening my eyes and looking around and seeing what else was interesting to me. I came out of the little box that I'd grown up in. I don't know if it's true anymore, but at least when I was going through school, the way to succeed was to do what you were supposed to and to stay in a really narrow field and become an expert in one area. And it was just letting go of that, of what I've been taught to do in that way, that allowed me to open myself up to a whole new career. So I don't have a lot of straightforward advice other than open your eyes, open the doors, open your soul, open your heart, and things will happen to you. It sounds wacky, but it's true.
Now, to that end, you embraced photography, and you have a pretty prolific career of doing photo education. Before we get onto the photo education side, though, for a lot of our listeners, what's the type of photography that you personally enjoy? You live in a very photographic part of the country. Do you do landscape, or do you have any areas of photography that you make the time to go out and shoot?
Because I learned photography in school, the kind of photography that I'm most interested in is the kind you learn in graduate school, and that's fine art photography. Now, there aren't a lot of outlets for that. Most people are not doing that. More people are doing landscapes, portraits, things that they can actually earn an income from on a daily basis, wedding photography. And I've tried all that. It's kind of how I supported myself during grad school. But what I really have always loved is making art out of photographs. And it's very interesting that I ended up being a Photoshop teacher because when I was doing just photography, that's what I was trying to do. Taking more than one photograph and putting them together in the darkroom or using mixed media, like using the old-fashioned photo processes where you would paint a developer medium onto paper and then expose a big negative on top of that. Or
miss the fun days of being locked in rooms with chemicals and fumes.
It sounds gross, but it's totally fun. It really is.
Oh, I know. There was a natural high from all of those artificial chemicals.
That's right. Well, it wasn't much worse than going into the darkroom. Darkroom was even more disgusting. At least the darkrooms in school, they had no ventilation, and But it's really fun. It's really fun for me to make things. And I see my approach to photography, apart from all my teaching in Photoshop, is that it's art. And it's just another medium, and that you can mix mediums and make the most astounding and unique and individualistic things. And that's what I like to do the most.
Great. Well, so to that end, you have worked with a wide range of digital tools. You've, obviously have published lots of training around Photoshop, but you also equally embrace Photoshop Elements. And we just had a brand new version of Photoshop Elements come out. And one of the things that people often get confused on is sort of this triad of Adobe tools. I'll have people come up and say, well, I've got Lightroom. Why would I need Photoshop? Or why does Photoshop Elements have layers, but, Lightroom doesn't? Could you sort of break down, we'll get to what's specifically new in Photoshop Elements, but a lot of people have a chip on their shoulder. They think that I'm too good for Elements or it's not a real program. Who is Photoshop Elements for in your experience? You've done a lot of training. You've helped a lot of people learn to use it. Who should be really looking at Elements and considering it as part of their tool set?
Well, that's a great question, Rich. And first of all, I want to say, there is some of this I'm too good for Elements stuff, and I just think in a way it doesn't make any sense. Everybody needs to use a tool that is easy for them to use and one that that kind of gets out of the way for them. And that depends on your level of experience, your level of skill, your level of time and interest in photo editing, post-processing, any kind of image. So that means that if you don't have a lot of time, or if you are a little afraid because maybe you think the photo editing boat you went by, you kind of missed the train or something, then Elements is a great place to start. And here's why. It offers different levels of tools. So it has inside of it at least 3, one could say 4 different editing workspaces geared toward different levels of users. So the easiest editing workspace is one where you just hit a button. It's like, the color looks bad, so I'll hit the button called color, and maybe it'll look better, and usually it does. Then, once you get beyond that, though, and you start to get your sea legs under you, you're like, all right, now I want to control that process a little more. It then offers the next level up, where you not only get to hit a button, but after you hit the button, you can pull a slider to kind of control what happens. And then, if you feel like you're steady with that, you can move on to another workspace that looks incredibly like Photoshop and makes Elements really one of the best deals on the planet because the program is cheap. I don't know what it costs. It costs different depending where you buy it, but it's under $100.
Looks like it's $100 as new and $79 for an upgrade. So, there are a couple of limitations, but I just want to put those out there so people can decide if this is right. One of the things I point out, and tell me if this has changed, because Adobe's known for change, is it doesn't support other modes outside of RGB. So if you do need to do very specific, primarily print-driven workflows, high-end print workflows like CMYK or grayscale or duotones, Photoshop Elements is really designed for RGB workflows, although RGB workflows are perfectly fine for sending for most photo labs and most inkjet and desktop printers. That's the space you're going to work in anyways, right?
That's right. It's geared toward photographers, people making photographs at various skill levels. It's not for people who want to do print work in terms of, design print work where you need to make Illustrator type vector-based imagery, or that you need to send to a print house in a different color space like CMYK. It's for people working with photographs. And so I think the truth is that's what most people are doing nowadays anyway, who aren't using it professionally.
Well, people forget that Photoshop and digital photography were two very, very different things. When I started in Photoshop and you started in Photoshop, it's like, oh, let's take this really archaic scanning technology and we're going to scan the photo in from a negative or from the print. And then you would sit there and about 7 minutes later, after this loud noise, the image would slowly unveil on your screen. And then we would do options like beep when done. Do you remember the beep when done checkbox? Photoshop was so slow that you would just crank the volume on your computer. Computers were so slow, it wasn't just Photoshop. And you would walk away and you would run something, and then, 5-10 minutes later, your machine would beep, and then it was time to do the next thing. Well, so much has changed. We've got cameras that make acquisition easy. I guess the only other thing that I see about Elements is it lacks some of the automation features. However, it makes up with incredibly flexible things like photo management, much like how Lightroom would have, social integration. I think it's got a really robust book tool for making and publishing sort of both printed books as well as cards, web output. So it does, you're right, it seems to be sort of around photography. And I often laugh, but when I have family members, they'll say, oh, well, what tool should I get? And some of them are in the Mac ecosystem, and they're more comfortable with iPhoto. And I think that if you are a Mac customer, iPhoto is a pretty compelling solution, but a lot of them are looking to step up or they want more. And on the PC side, I don't think there's an equivalent tool to iPhoto as far as ease of use and a nice rounded tool set. I think that really Photoshop Elements is that logical step. So I see it to be, the beginning mode that you mentioned is just as easy as a tool like iPhoto or some of the other starting photo tools. But because it doesn't plateau, it seems to me that Photoshop Elements in many cases is enough of the big brother Photoshop to give you the features you need, or training wheels to get you there if you do eventually need to step up for your career.
Yeah, I agree. And it's way more than an iPhoto. iPhoto is kind of like the automatic part of Elements. But just so people understand, what Elements has, I kind of think of it as 3, maybe 4 programs in one. You start out with an organizer. And here's this, Rich, that as people are shooting more and more photographs, they've got a huge problem. They've got a big mess, and that is one of the reasons that Lightroom took off, is people found a way a tool or a program that had multiple tools to help them organize their photos.
I would remember I would go and shoot a concert, and it's like, am I going to shoot 2 rolls of film or 4? Oh, look, I have, what is that? 72 pictures to decide which are the good 10 I'm going to print in the magazine this month. It was not hard. Now you come back and it's like, okay, I've got 4,000 pictures. So which ones do I use?
Oh, yeah, it's true. We're taking more and more pictures, and we need a way to organize them. So Elements has a whole separate part of the program called the organizer that is a lot like Lightroom. It has the features, some of the same features you'll find in Lightroom, like keyword tagging. Nowadays, most people know what that is, thanks to Facebook and other tools that we have. There are things called albums, which are kind of like collections in Lightroom, which are virtual groupings of photos, so that you can leave photos in the folders where you normally put them, but yet be able to access groups of them for different projects, just linking to them in the folders where they live. There are brand new features in the Photoshop Elements 11 organizer that help you to organize by the ways that we normally think about our photos, 3 different ways: by people, by places, and by events. And those are half automatic and half manual. And they're great because all of this is geared toward helping you to find photos when you're looking for them. So that's what the organizer does. It helps you to organize, manage, and then later find the photos that you're looking for.
Okay, I'd like to take just a quick moment to thank a couple of the show's sponsors that let us bring Photofocus to you. First off is ViewBug. If you are looking to put together an online contest, you want to have people give them a chance to showcase their photos, ViewBug offers a great way for you to run photo contests that really allows you to integrate photos, have a photography contest. Definitely something worth checking out. And we have a new sponsor for the show. Really would like to welcome Epson. They've got a great line of high-end papers called signature-worthy papers. And you want to take a look at this. If you are looking to do fine art prints, much like we were talking about earlier on the show, this idea of great photographs that you want to share with folks, looking to sell your images, Epson has a new line of paper, the signature-worthy print paper. Great stuff. You're going to want to check that out. And we'd like to welcome to the show. All right. Now, I think one important thing to mention is if you do purchase Elements through the Mac App Store, which is a popular way that a lot of people are buying.
No more. Can't do it.
Oh, they can't? They pulled it out?
No, it's just that it's not, Elements 11 is not yet in the Mac App Store. I don't know whether it will be or not.
Okay, but when they put the previous version in the Mac App Store, that organizer feature was removed because Apple sometimes gets weird about things that directly compete with their software. So it was just the processing features. It didn't have that catalog features in the previous edition. So you may want to look at where you buy to get the full functionality, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. If you buy Photoshop Elements 10, which is the previous version, and you buy it from the Mac App Store, then you will only get the editor part. You won't get this organizer part. And the idea is that you can use iPhoto to organize your photos. It automatically sucks your photos in anyway when you're on a Mac if you haven't turned it off. And then from there, you can get the photos into Elements for editing. But Photoshop Elements 11, the current version that came out last week, we don't yet know if it will be in the Mac App Store or not.
Yeah, that's a whole separate political issue. So okay.
I have no control. So anyway, so you get your things organized. You get all your photos organized, and part of the course that I do for Lint.com gives you a system for organizing too. It doesn't just say, "Hey, there's an organizer, go use it," because I think that's confusing to people. I try to tell people an easy way to organize using the tools. And then from there, you can open your photos into the whole separate part called the editor. And that's where you'll find what I described earlier, kind of the automatic quick edit mode, the little more useful guided edit mode. And then finally, what unfortunately they call the expert edit mode, but I don't like to think of it as needing expert skills. It's not a good marketing decision because I think that scares people. But basically, the expert edit mode in Photoshop 11 is Photoshop a little bit dummied down, but you'd be amazed at what's there. For example, of course, you have layers, and you even have layer masks. You have selections, and in Photoshop 11, new feature is the Refine Edge dialog, which, Rich, in Photoshop CS6 made it possible to fairly easily select things that have soft edges, like a woman's hair that's all out here and frizzy, right? How are you going to select that normally? Well, if you have the Refine Edge feature, you can do that, and now you have that in Elements. That's pretty sophisticated. And just, kind of all the normal things that people use day to day in Photoshop, you will find in Photoshop Elements Expert Edit mode.
And there are some content aware tools as well, right, for removing objects?
Yes, there are. There is a spot healing brush tool that has a content aware mode. So if you used to using that in Photoshop to do things like remove wires from in front of a complicated backdrop, you can do that in Elements now. They have other retouching tools like the healing brush tool that you find in Photoshop. There is a fill mode that you can sort of fill, but they don't have every single feature that's in Photoshop because, why would you pay thousands of dollars or whatever for hundreds of dollars for Photoshop if you got everything in Elements?
Well, actually, though, this does bring up an interesting conundrum, which is, and this further complicating the issue, is how Adobe is changing their pricing models right now. So you can get the full version of Photoshop for $19 a month in their cloud subscription plan. So if you look at that, you don't actually own it. You're using it on a monthly fee. And so in the course of a year, you're plunking down about, what is that, $20, $240 in the course of a year. Now, Elements is $100. So, you do have this sort of mentality that you are seeing Photoshop itself becoming more approachable, but coming up from the other direction, Photoshop Elements seems to be saying, okay, we're going to give you the core tools, and if you want a lot of those advanced tools, they're in here, but we also have some other easier modes. Now, how often is Adobe updating Elements? Is it every year and a half historically? Is it more frequently, less frequently? Has there been a pattern?
Yeah, I think there is a pattern. Now, I don't work for Adobe. I'm just saying like what I've noticed the last few versions, that it's revving about once a year. It seems to be around the holiday time, starting in the fall, moving into the holiday time, which is great because that's when people take a lot of pictures. But again, I don't have the inside information on that. I don't know. I also want to say that I'm really excited about the new way that Adobe is marketing Photoshop and its other Creative Suite programs, and Lightroom as well, making them available on a subscription basis for people who don't need them regularly or perhaps don't want to spend the big bucks all at once. I like the fact that there are options for people, and I don't think it's an either-or proposition. I think these are giving you other ways to have access to products other than the way that I don't want people to do it, which is to steal them. And to be on, let's be honest, a lot of people were doing it that way, and I think that's bad for everyone concerned. It's not just bad for Adobe, it's bad for us as consumers because, look, Adobe needs the money to develop the products, and if people are just stealing the products, then they won't be able to give us more and better features all the time. So I want people to buy them however is comfortable for them, and having access to the what's it called now, Creative Cloud, and being able to subscribe to all or some programs in the Creative Suite, whatever suits you, is a wonderful option. Yeah,
so I think here, and just to take it back to Elements for a second, for those who are considering it, my logic is if it's a $79 app to upgrade or $100 new, people are like, wow, that's not a big discount for the upgrade price. Yeah, there's the cost to entry, the barrier to entry on Elements is pretty low. But I do think, as a regular user of software, that many people will buy software and not really take the time to learn what's new. It looks to me that the features that have made it into Elements with each new version have been fairly substantial. And so the $8 a month you're paying to stay current, typically when you look at the upgrade price over the course, is really pretty low, especially for the new features and the time-saving things. You've had a chance to dig really deeply. What are the top 5 new things in Elements that you just love? That you think, if you're not using this, download the demo, try it out. If you haven't used Elements in a while, give it a shot. What stands out to you as the top features?
Well, the first thing that you're going to see, I think most people are more interested in editing than organizing. So if you're in the editor, the first thing you'll see is they have completely revamped the interface, making it way easier to use, way easy to discover the features that you're going to want to use the most, and just easier to get around. So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2, in the editor, to me, as I mentioned, the Refine Edge dialog is really important because it makes it so much easier to make selections, and selections are really important. They're the way that you can edit and work with, targeted parts of a photo, not just with the photo globally.
One of the things I often say to users is that the act of making a selection is like taking the chisel that the sculptor uses and making a small stroke, as opposed to taking out the sledgehammer and whacking the block of marble. It takes several small strokes, controlled strokes, to bring things out. If you want to bring the sky and pull the levels on the sky down and boost the color, you may want to do that differently than the skin tones of the people standing against the sky. So color and exposure are often very subjective based on your subject and backlighting. So any tool that makes selections better is a great tool, and I think this really stands out. So what are your other 3?
Well, I just want to mention, this is not new, but just so you know, you also have adjustment layers in Elements, just like you do in Photoshop. And adjustment layers come with their own layer masks, so you can use them in conjunction with selections to target your photo adjustments, so to particular areas of a photo. So selections aren't just for cutting things out and putting them against a different background, which is maybe what the uneducated public might think. They're very important for photo correcting too. So those are the big things in the editor that jump out. In the organizer, as I mentioned, right away you're going to see that there are 4 new editing workspaces. And one of those is called the media view, and that basically shows you thumbnails of all the photos that you've imported into the organizer, that you're using the organizer to manage and find. Then there are the 3 new views, the people view, the places view, and the events view. And I think that they're very useful because that is how people tend to organize their photos. So in the places view, for example, they offer you a map, much like the map that you have in Lightroom. It will automatically pick up any GPS coordinates that you, if you're shooting with a GPS-enabled camera or iPhone, for example, and it will place your photos on a map. So you can quickly say, hey, I want to see all the pictures I took in Paris. Go to Paris on the map, and there are the pictures.
Now, in fairness, I do think that this sort of organization structure Apple took the lead on a little bit earlier, but I think we now have even parity between the manufacturers. And, you can't patent an idea. I think Adobe continues to do a nice job, and I think their Places implementation is a bit nicer. It's more focused on functionality, and Adobe, in my opinion, has done a better job with metadata. So as we are building bigger and bigger photo collections, the ability to sort by things like location or sort by who's in there. From the point of view of, I do lots of organization, but I'll absolutely tell you that when I've got a big shoot or I come back from a family trip, I will absolutely use a facial recognition approach to quickly find pictures and start doing groupings, because that's how the brain thinks. Oh, find me all the shots of my daughter so I could put up the 10 best to Facebook for grandma to see, as opposed to, oh, let me just scroll through the 900 pictures from that last family vacation to find the 10 good ones.
That's right. It's a great way to be able to, like, I'm always looking for photos of my kids, and I don't want to have to remember what folder I put some ancient photo of my daughter in. I just want to see all the photos of my daughter over the last 10 years from when she was little to now she's a grown up, right? And so this method of organizing by the way that we look for our photos is important. So that second way of organizing now is by people, and it is an automatic facial recognition system that you do not find in Photoshop. And you do not find in Lightroom. So this is where Elements kind of has something important that the other Adobe photo editing products don't have yet. I hope they will in the future. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I hate when they do that. Like some of the photo merge features and even some of the bridge features came from Elements.
I love that.
I know. This is why I sometimes will still install Elements, even though I do have access to all the pro things, is because, one of the weirdest things in the world these days, and I saw this with DSLR video, is that sometimes innovation starts at the opposite end of the spectrum than you would expect. Sometimes the pros are the last to get a feature, or they're like, oh, well, there's still some rough spots in here, and our really demanding, aka whiny customers won't get this feature, but we'll put this out here and we'll refine and get through the rough spots and try it out in this consumer product, and we'll see how people react. It's amazing how technology sometimes sneaks its way out. The same way, like when you look at Adobe Reveal or Carousel or whatever the heck they're calling it now, there's some really good management tools in there that are in a product that's not really designed for what I need it to do, but it's interesting, and so it's good to see the companies thinking. One more feature, something that just stands out to you that you did just produce a really detailed training course for lynda.com on this with more in the way. When you stood back and you said, "Wow, I can't imagine how much longer that used to take me to do before this came out," or "I can't imagine how much better that looks than the old way I used to have to do that."
Well, you're going to think this is really boring, but this is the most useful thing that I think they've done. They fixed what they call the folder view, so that now, because here's the thing, even with all these new ways of looking at things, by people, by events, by places, honestly, Joe Blow is still looking for the folders. I mean, I don't mean to say Joe Blow in a negative way. I mean, my friends, all my people who went to grad school in photo, they are still using folders to organize their photos. And so in Elements, you now can access your folders way more easily than you ever could in past versions. They appear in a bar along the side. You can look at them in a tree view, like in Windows Explorer, or just in a kind of a flat view, which only has the folders that already contain photos you brought into Elements. So I think fixing folder location view has been really helpful for people. Now, of course, there are many more sexy features I could talk about, but since you're keeping me down to just a few, I'll stop there. But I do urge you to look at Elements. I also want to make the point, though, that, Elements doesn't live in a vacuum. I'm not pushing Elements. I don't have any stake in Elements. I don't have any stock in Elements. I just think it's another tool for people. But once you get a little more sophisticated, you will want to look beyond, perhaps, and look at Lightroom, one of my favorite programs on the planet, and look at Photoshop too, and start thinking about how the programs work together. But in the meantime, I urge you to take a look at lynda.com and, just to get up and running with Photoshop Elements. I think you'll enjoy my most basic course that's already on the lynda.com training library now.
Okay. And what I would suggest for those of you sort of sitting on the fence here, and this is global software advice, is stay current. Software manufacturers are doing a very good job of adding features that genuinely are speeding up people's workflow. And while we talked a lot about the organizational features, if that's not a part of your workflow, make it a part of your workflow. The more time you spend, for every 1 hour you spend organizing your photos from the shoot, you will reap hours and hours of benefits of increased speed and functionality, giving you more time to do the enhancements and the looks that you like. So I am too excited that we're seeing more options to make it easier to find things. Adobe does offer a full trial, so people should check that out. And you did mention a couple of the places where people can go to learn your stuff. Is there a blog, or do you have are you particularly active on one social network over another where people can keep up with all of your latest training and resources that you're putting out?
Well, I'm just one of those. I've always got my nose in the newest, latest, and greatest thing. And I've been podcasting and Pinteresting and Facebooking and Twittering always at the very beginning. Well, now my hottest, greatest, most favoritist place to go is Google+. And the reason is Hangouts. Hangouts are kind of like video podcasts. They're both broadcast live, and then they're available later on YouTube. And if you go to Google+, you will find a show that I've been doing for about, coming close to a year now, called the Photoshop Show. Every other Tuesday evening we do it. And this Tuesday evening, Rich Harrington was our guest.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you were great. And he showed us how to use video in Photoshop. And if you missed that show, you can catch that show and all the other Photoshop shows on YouTube. So just go to YouTube and type in the Photoshop Show. And you'll find all those episodes where you learn about Photoshop, Lightroom, Elements, video, all of it.
Well, Jan, I'm glad that you were able to join us on the show. You do put out a tremendous amount of resources. And, for those of you listening, one of the things I would say is that I think in many ways, Jan's education philosophy and mine line up, which is you need to stay current, you need to work smart, and you need to truly understand your software tools so you can get more done. If people do want to see some of your fine art work that you've done, do you have a personal blog or a website where they could explore some of your work, or do you keep that private like many fine artists do?
Well, you can see most of the photos of which I'm most proud on Google+. I've also got some on Facebook, but these days I'm more involved in the Google+ photography community, which is very strong. And that's where you can go. If you look at my stream, you'll find albums of my work there.
Great. Well, thanks for being on the show this week, Jan. It was really good to hear from you, your perspective on both Photoshop Elements and the transition to photography and fine art photography. I want to make a quick mention of two other sponsors if you'd like to dig deeper and keep things going for you. First off is Kelby Training, which offers an excellent opportunity for you to go ahead and learn more online. They have a wealth of online classes, and you can learn more. We've got a discount code for $20 off if you head over to Photofocus. Just click the link on the page for Kelby Training, and you will save $20 on their online classes. And we also have the ICE Society. I highly recommend you check that out. That's another place that you can go for learning. Jerry Gahonis offers a whole bunch of resources there. And if you'd like to learn from him, some really great classes helping you teach about lighting and learning a wide range of things. Jerry is a great photographer, does a lot in the wedding industry, and I highly recommend you check out the ICE Society and his website. Okay, it's time to head back to Photoshop World, where we had a chance to catch up with David Ziser. David is a great wedding photographer himself and has a lot of interesting advice to share for those of you looking to make the move into the professional world of shooting events and weddings. He also just has some practical advice for all photographers. So let's check in with David.
A wedding photographer in Cincinnati, Ohio. Although I do weddings, I do a lot of bar bat mitzvahs as well in the city. I've been doing it for a long time. I'm not going to tell you how long, but it's been a long, long time. And I've seen this whole profession go through many, many morphs over as many years as I've been involved in it. So it's always fun. It's always exciting. I think digital. We started migrating to the digital side of things in 1999. So I photographed my first fully digital wedding with a 3.2 megapixel Fuji S1 camera at the time, and it was never graved the Hasselblad after that from that point forward. So it's been a great ride for as long as I've been involved in it, and I think the whole digital thing just has breathed more life into my creativity and some of the things I try to bring to the table for my clients.
Now, what are some trends that we're seeing? Some of the things that I've noticed, for example, is that more push for people from weddings and events to want rights to put their images up to social media networks. That we're seeing a shifting away from printing to other deliverables. People are often looking at electronic delivery. Are you seeing any major changes in the marketplace or evolutions?
I think it really comes down to what the photographer wants to sell to his clients. We've seen big changes in wedding photography, particularly over the last 3 years. And I blogged about this on my Digital Pro Talk blog several times. And, what's been the big change? Well, there's been this explosion of photographers into the wedding scene. There's been gyrations in pricing that just happened over the last 3 or 4 years. What's the reason for a lot of that? I think a big reason for that is, number one, digital. More importantly, digital cameras built into the smartphones. Everybody carries a camera with them these days. Number three, Facebook. 4 years old, or a little older than that, but almost 1 billion users right now. People posting images everywhere, and they're posting their smartphone images or whatever. So photography has really been It's been, well, everybody's doing it. Well, beforehand, you hired a professional photographer with this Hasselblad camera to show up and take the photographs. Now everybody's a photographer, and that's okay. I mean, I like to say that the enthusiasm that I felt when I first had the photo bug touch me years and years ago is what so many people are feeling right now. I think the ability for them to do image capture so easily these days is what has made so many people say, well, heck, maybe I could try weddings, maybe I could whatever. And I think because it's so easy. I mean, beforehand, wedding photography was easy to get into. You bought yourself a 35mm camera, $10 worth of business cards, and you were in the business of wedding photography. But now it's eminently more easier to get involved in because now there's no cost of admission. Even back in the old days, the film days, 6 or 7 years ago, you still had the commitment of buying a camera. You still had the commitment of buying a couple $100 worth of film and processing for every single wedding. Once we went to digital, that cost of membership into the wedding photography market disappeared. We always used to joke back in the early digital days, back in the film days, it was, $1 every time you press the button, and now it's free. So now since it's free, it's really opened the floodgates to everybody wanting to think that they can earn a few extra bucks shooting wedding photography.
So how does someone distinguish themselves? This isn't to say that new photographers shouldn't enter the market.
Not at all, no.
But are there any hallmarks of really approaching this professionally? Do you notice any business practices with some emerging professionals, people new to the market, that if they just had more experience, they'd know better pricing issues or rights issues that they're giving up?
I mean, you look at the cost of wedding photography these days, and I think the reason the costs are so low is because what else has happened in the last couple years, whatever, has been Craigslist. We got the Craigslist photographer out there, and I personally have seen ads in the Cincinnati Craigslist market listings that say, well, weddings $200, $500, $700. The ones I blogged about was two of them. We'll shoot your wedding for free for the experience. And I thought, okay, now we're down to free for wedding photography. That's kind of
because experience puts food on the table.
Exactly. But the funniest one I just heard this a couple weeks ago from a friend of mine who said, I just saw, we'll photograph your wedding photographer, photograph your wedding for $500, includes the catering.
Wow.
So what's this coming to? But anyway, as I was saying, Richard, there's so many people entering the field. I said it in my pre-con class yesterday. It's still always about differentiating yourselves from the competition. And everybody is out there. So many people are out there just running and gunning. Uncle Harry, Cousin Mary, getting whatever. And they're having a good time shooting the photographs. They're looking back at the camera. They're getting happy smiles, good expressions and everything. But you still have to differentiate yourself from everybody out there. And now there's even a bigger pool of people we need to differentiate ourselves from. And I think one of the best ways to do that is with lighting and composition, number one, customer service, number two, product that you deliver to your clients, number three. And we talked earlier on, you asked a question about the DVDs. And I said it depends on the photographer. The Craigslist photographer, they're happy to deliver that DVD or that CD and make their couple $100 of what I call beer money. Buys them, gets them another down payment on the lens or buys them part of another camera or whatever. And that's all fine and good. But you know what? I got to put food on the table and shoes for the kids and the car payment and a house payment. And I'm not going to be able to do that with a $200 wedding. So I have to give my clients something that has much greater value than that. And because it has greater value, I get to charge a higher price for that particular product.
So how do you establish that with potential customers? I imagine these days, when you are getting a cold call or someone hears you, you've gotten referral business and they come in, what's the percentage of the time that people have sticker shock or they say, oh, but my other friend hired this photographer and it was $400?
Well, I think that's an interesting remark you make because I think sticker shock is something that a lot of photographers are experiencing, particularly the guys who've been at this for a long, long time. Because, the average level of wedding photography, the average price of wedding photography has really dropped substantially. And that isn't just at the bottom end or the middle end. People say, oh, the carriage tray, they're safe as can be. No, that's not true. Even the carriage tray photographers have seen a substantial drop in those wedding averages. I'm lucky enough to have been in this business long enough that I would say nearly all of my referrals are word word of mouth referrals. So they paid the price before. They know what it's going to be. They say, yeah, I want you to do my daughter's wedding, my second daughter's wedding, and we're happy to go book them. If I was, if I was looking to just enter this business right now, I would first of all be looking about how I could differentiate my photography from my clients. And then number two, how I could reach the clients and let them know what those differences are. Even how we market. My gosh, I'm dating myself, but we used to hang the photographs in the tuxedo shops and the bridal salons. We all know the brides ain't shopping wedding photographers and bridal salons and tuxedo shops. They're looking online, they're Googling, they're seeing what the guy or the girl's got going on with their blog, with their Facebook page, or whatever. And the other thing, today's clientele, our new millennial client, is looking for, they want to develop that sense of intimacy, or feel that they've developed a sense of intimacy with that photographer that they may hire before they even make that phone call, or not even phone call, but let's say that first contact. And that's why it is imperative upon today's new photographer to do whatever they can do to build that sense of intimacy with YouTube videos on their website or on their Facebook page or whatever it happens to be.
Are you getting friend requests from potential clients who just want to get to know you better?
Oh, sure, but that's all fine. But it's still, we have to reach out to those potential clients out there. We have to show a bit more of ourselves. It's not just about showing our albums, it's about showing ourselves as well, and maybe letting them have a little peek in our heart and our soul and our passion about what we do. And I think that is another big factor in how we need to book our potential clients. Is I think we have to bring passion to the table. It's no longer about, I think I'm sitting here talking with you because I've been sitting through seminars and workshops, again, for many, many years. I've heard so many speakers speak about how to get the people in and everything. It's no longer about, oh, look at my beautiful photographs, and you can have this album cover and, in leather and suede and palomino hide or whatever in the world happens.
Because the internet's kind of leveled that, right? Like exactly. They go, oh, I know where you order that from. I was already checking out their website.
Exactly. So it still comes down to the photographer today having to be connected with his potential clients, with his current clients, and with his vendor buddies in the area. You have to do that not just with Facebook, and not just with your blog and your website, but you also have to do it with connecting with your vendor buddies. You have to get everything really kind of spinning in the same direction to get people to be seeking you out for your products and services.
These days, what are your three best sources of leads for new jobs?
My best sources of leads would be word-of-mouth referrals from past clients, probably number one. Number two, for me, my vendor buddies, because we just had this huge wedding in Cincinnati just this past Sunday. I was on the job for 14 hours. And I'll mention the price tag. They brought in the band for $30,000, and the whole event was about a $250,000 event. Nice event. I've done 4 events for that family. I quote them a price; they could care less. So that's probably word of mouth number one. Vendor buddies number two. And again, if you're hanging out with the right vendors, and that takes a while to develop as well. I think these photographers. I think it's interesting. Well, my gosh, I want to go out and make $1 million in wedding photography. Well, okay, I've been at it. I'm going to say
I want to make $1 million sitting at home.
Well, I photographed my first wedding, and their listeners might drop their jaw, but 49 years ago. I jokingly say I'm an old guy, but I'm not that old of a guy. I just started early on, and I've been doing it. I never went to school for photography. My background is in engineering and physics. I got degrees in both of those fields, almost computer science degree. But I paid for my college education by taking photographs and by shooting weddings. So,
and were your parents concerned that wasn't a real job?
My dad always wanted me to get a real job, and every time I told my mom I was raising prices, she said, "You're going to be out of business. You're going to be out of business." So anyway, here I am today, still doing just fine.
Yeah,
but
congratulations on finding a real job.
Yes, maybe not, according to my dad, but I've enjoyed these many years, and it's fun to look back, and it's fun just to see what the new photographers are doing out there. I mean, some of my favorite new photographers out there. There's a photographer in Dallas, Texas. Her name is Lynn Michelle. She's 34, 35 years old. She used to be, she was earning 6 figures as an IT department head or something, but she liked doing her photography, and she liked doing boudoir photography and everything. She told her accountant husband that, "Honey, I'm changing my day job and going into photography." He said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Well, she's doing 6 figures now in Dallas, Texas. She's the lead photographer in Dallas. Google wedding photography in Dallas, Texas. her SEO puts her at the top of the heap every time you Google a Dallas photographer. She's got it together. She's got it cooking. And she'll tell you, too, that I'm connected with my clients and I'm connected with my vendor buddies here. She'll also tell you that I sell albums. They might want a DVD or a CD, but I believe in albums, and that's what I'm going to sell. That was one of your first questions.
Yeah.
I never really came back to circling around to answering it, but it's what a photographer wants to sell to their clients. If somebody wants to make a quick $300 or $400 or $500 and sell the CD or DVD, good for them. Me, I've got to make that car payment and a house payment. I'm going to be selling a bigger.
So if the client comes back, like that big job you had, and they said, "Oh, we also want digital photos," do you just say no?
No, I wouldn't say no. You never ever say no to a client. Another thing the new photographers don't know how to do is they don't know how to sell very well. They only know how to present their work, but they don't know how to get the client to really get excited about the images that they're doing, and they don't know how to excite the client into other product offerings that they could be offering. It's not about just a CD or just an album. There are so many other things out there. I've said in my seminars over the years, what we need to do is be like Bush's baked beans. We photographers need to market like Bush's baked beans. And you say, what's baked beans got to do with wedding photography? When I was a kid, and I went to the grocery store with my mom when we were going to have a picnic on a Saturday morning, what did we buy? We bought the hamburgers, the hot dogs, the buns, and the baked beans and the coleslaw. And you went into that grocery store and you saw Campbell's pork and beans. Go into a grocery store these days and what do you see? You see Campbell's pork and beans. You see Bush's baked beans. You see Southwestern Bush's. You see low-fat Bush's. You see smokehouse Bush's. Now I've counted, I think, 7 or 8 varieties of freaking baked beans.
It's all that golden retriever's fault.
Exactly. But the thing is, it's about taking product, expanding a simple photography product into many other different products we can offer our clients. And digital makes that so eminently easy these days to do that to just be offering a CD or an 8x10 or whatever, those days are gone. And we need to learn about how other people market to really be successful in this profession.
Good. So one last piece of advice. What would you say to someone who is sitting on the fence saying, I think I want to go pro? What should they do before they quit that day job or go and sink a big investment in a bunch of equipment that they might not be ready for?
I have 3 of my friends right now, my younger friends, my 30-something friends that have hung out with me as assistants or whatever, read my blog, and they're making a big leap or whatever. And I think of my closest buddy right now, and I'm thinking, so I'm ready to go. I said, how much money are you making? So I'm making about $50,000 in part-time. He's got a great $75,000 a year job, but he's making $50,000. I think I'm ready to go. I said, so how much of that is profit? Well, it's maybe about $19,000, $20,000. I said, so how many hours a week are you working to make that $19,000, $20,000? He says, oh my gosh, I come home from my day job. He said, I'm working another 20, 25 hours a week just to do that. I said, do the math. You ain't making any money yet. So don't quit your day job till you're really making money. And then the other challenge, and what takes courage to do for a photographer that now is killing themselves by working a 40-hour week and then working 40 or 50 more, now they're making 50 or 75,000 here, they're making 50, 60, 75,000 here, and then they want to go full-time, and then they want to cut their payroll in half. That's a courageous thing photographers do to make that leap.
Better have a good spouse.
Exactly. But more importantly, you better bring an unbridled sense of passion to the profession so that you will never, ever give up. Too many photographers are in this business for the short run. A couple of years, I'm not making enough money, and they're back out. And you also better know that you can succeed in this business, because if you have any doubt at all, you never will succeed in the business. So it's passion, it's knowing that you can succeed. It's constantly honing your profession, your craft, and your art to continue to develop your product, to take it to new levels, and to bring that great quality product and that passion and that level of enthusiasm to those potential clients. And that's how you turn them on to get them to hire you for their wedding photography. And you have to take a lot of no's before you get yeses, and then you have to start building your business. I was the cheapest photographer in Cincinnati, Ohio when I started. Now I happen to be the most expensive, or one of the most expensive guys in town, but it's taken me a long time to get there. And that's kind of a don't give up attitude that I've had over all these years. My dad wanted me to get a real job, never did. Stuck with it in the photography, and really happy that I did.
Excellent. Well, David, I really appreciate you joining our listeners today and sharing some practical advice. Where are some good places people can catch up with you? Any books or a blog that you recommend?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've got my daily blog, which is digitalprotalk.com. It has about 300,000 page views a month on it, so it's a good medium-sized blog out there. I blog. I'm saying I'm blogging every day. I'm hesitating saying that because I've cut it back a bit because I'm in the middle of writing my second book too. But it's normally an everyday blog, which is includes a video tutorial every Tuesday, highlights of what the interesting things that I found on Monday, Wednesday, whatever's on my mind. Business Day Thursday, I've had, which really scares me because my Business Day Thursday post is 5 years of posts about how to market, how to sell, how to develop different
I think it's time to maybe bundle that into a book.
Well, maybe so, but I had a photographer from England said, I've been reading your blog for 5 years. I'm going full time. I said, don't lay that on me.
Not my fault.
And then also I had a best-selling book, thanks to Kelby Media a couple years ago, entitled Captured by the Light, and that has now precipitated into a quest to do a second book, which is in the rough draft right now. I've got the book written, but now it takes another couple months to get it polished up. So,
good. Well, I'm sure if people follow your blog, they'll get the full. Yeah,
they'll get everything.
Good. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your practical advice.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, that's this week's show. We'll be back in 10 days with more. Thanks for joining me on Photofocus.